Redistribution Party. Redistribution Party. Redistribution Party. Redistribution Party. Redistribution Party.
Hiya, welcome to Mandatory Redistribution Party. This episode is about nature, both as in animals and also human nature, and kind of both. What do you think human nature is? Do you and I share the same nature? Does human nature just mean what humans do? Because if it does, it's a bit all over the place, isn't it? Like cruelty, compassion, hatred, love, liking roller coasters, not liking roller coasters. They're all part of human nature. Some human societies thought slavery or divine right monarchy was natural. What is nature? Nature can mean both the inherent character of a thing, or nature can mean all the stuff on Earth that isn't human. It isn't us. Like an oxbow lake. Or a massive rock. Like massive. Your hardest mate couldn't dream of shifting it. Or like a wolf. Or like a cow. Are cows comrades?
Cows?
Mooers. Moo! Those.
I
Live in
say
fields.
cows are lumpenproles.
Cows are lumpenproles?
Lumpen
Why?
cows.
Why?
Because they're eternally subjugated and don't do anything about it and have no class consciousness and can't achieve class
Can we
consciousness.
raise? Yeah, well, that's the thing. Can we raise their class consciousness?
Can you raise the class consciousness?
Cow revolution.
Is there a reason why you've picked just cows?
Literally the first thing that's come into my
Yeah,
head.
fair enough. I just thought we were going to do a gotcha about some sort of historical event.
You're like, has there actually been a cow revolution?
Really going to be egg on my face.
Yeah, turned on the farmer.
Can you raise the class consciousness of cows or any livestock? You could condition them to attack farmers, but they wouldn't know why they were doing it.
I think cows rebel. Because cows, like all animals that have some brain about them, have like a rich inner life, don't they? Like cows can be lonely and sad and happy.
Animals have instinctually know, have you seen like one monkey gets a bit of cucumber and one monkey gets a strawberry and they know that's not fair.
Yeah.
So maybe cows have an understanding that like other cows could be having a really nice time. What cows would need to see is free cows. Then you'd have a revolution. The problem is that all cows are subjugated equally. If they could look beyond the fence and see free cows living a free, liberated life, that farmer would be gored within minutes.
Yeah, I suppose because it's not another cow who has enslaved the cows, right?
Yeah.
It's a fight. It's just a totally other thing. It's like if the bourgeoisie were lizards, David Icke style.
Yeah. Or just they live.
Yeah.
If the cows had the special sunglasses, and could see that
so a cow.
We
give them the sunglasses.
sunglasses.
We give them the special sunglasses, and then they look at a farmer and see an evil cow.
Yeah. Okay.
Bang.
So I was thinking of the scene where he like sees the adverts and it says, "Oh, consume, obey,
drink milk."
But I was thinking with cows, they just need to be able to just read. They would understand what's going on. Enclosure, slaughterhouse. Okay, not so good.
Moo.
Yeah.
Where I'm going with this is ages ago in my capitalism explainer, I had like a throwaway thing about people on the left generally being veggie. And I started looking into, when I was writing it, I was like, is this worth explaining now? And then just thought about it and then thought, oh, no, it's too big a beast. But then I was thinking like the two things rarely explicitly connect, right? You've got like Marxism, animal liberation, and they're like two kind of separate things. Like the Bolsheviks aren't like trying to emancipate the chickens, and like the RSPCA aren't trying to raise class consciousness, right? They're like two separate things.
But you see them as functionally identical or existing on the same spectrum of liberation.
I don't know if I do, but that's the. I'm just like what I hand it to is I am confused about this.
If we lived in the Soylent Green universe, then those struggles would become identical, wouldn't they?
Oh, because we're being eaten as well.
Yeah,
we'd have to be being eaten by the animals.
What? No, I'm not saying symmetrical. I'm just saying that the fact that our form our oppression take.
Well, no. If you look at like factory
Why would
farming.
you be eating fucking
Factory
animals?
farming. Yeah, I got confused by what you were. Sorry. Factory farming is the same. You know how like they enclosed the common land and then people didn't have access to the commons, so instead of peasants they became the proletariat and then they became wage laborers, right?
Yeah.
That happened to animals as well. Animals, like factory farming developed, like you didn't have in feudalism, you didn't have like a giant chicken farm with the KFC chicken combine machine that like, right?
Yeah. I get
So
you. So the more that we've been forced into like tighter factories, the more they were farmed in a way. We use factory as the metaphor for the way we farmed our animals.
Yeah,
the word factory starts off as a description of how we treated humans.
Yeah, industrialization happened to them as well. Capitalism happened to them as well, which is why, like, I'm a vegetarian, but I'm a like dreadful vegetarian. Like once every 6 months, as I snap, I have like coming back from a gig, some sort of 11:30 shame bucket of chicken, and then what else have I done? Oh, I had a pork cube at that wedding I was at the other day because I was having an anxiety attack. Yeah, and then that just sent me under more, if anything. But I'm vegetarian, not out of like, I mean, I've told transgressions. Generally, most of the time, 95%.
But there's a difference between, we do a thing with vegetarianism where we don't distinguish between like praxis and belief, but we do it with other things.
Yep.
Like I could say, oh, I'm a Marxist, but sometimes I will buy Coca-Cola. And I was like, you've read Das Kapital, and yet I see you've got a Pepsi in your hand.
Yeah.
But with vegetarian, like sometimes you'll break or you'll find out, oh, there's gelatin in this.
Yeah.
But you'll say, oh, I'm not a vegetarian anymore.
Well,
it's just the way we treat that form of praxis.
The reason I'm vegetarian is for environmental reasons. Because I was like, I think that's like the most kind of convincing thing. Argument is like we've created an environmental crisis, and one of the things you can do that might help that is consume less meat, because meat has a huge environmental impact. I know lots of other things do as well, like clothes, blah blah blah, but that's not what we're talking about. And I think that's persuasive, right? But it's not meat; it's meat under capitalism. If you go to some like indigenous tribe or some commune where there's like the chickens aren't in a factory thing and they're just like eating worms out of the dirt or eating waste stuff from the farm or from the humans, like that's not destroying the environment. That's part of like its own little ecosystem. Equally, like deforesting a whole fucking forest to plant soy, even if like, yes, down the line, that's still the meat industry because it's going to go and feed cattle or whatever. Like monoculture, Monsanto, megacorp, like farming under capitalism is the cause of the environmental disaster, not meat inherently, Yeah. So there's the environmental thing, which kind of overlaps with the struggle against capitalism, right? So there's a point of overlap there. The other point of overlap is exploitation, right? So animals are exploited. Factory farm chickens, even like bees making honey are kind of exploited by that definition of like
alienated from their own meat.
They're alienated from their own labor. They're alienated from their labor, right? They are.
But it's not labor. It's alienated from their own sinews,
their own
bones and flesh.
Yeah. We were with the honey. I was doing the bees making the honey, right?
Oh, yeah.
But we're not eating bees. They taste rank. You ever seen a dog eat a wasp and they do that like... What? You've not seen that? Seen that loads. I've seen that loads. It's a hashtag dog wasp.
You've seen that loads.
I've seen that loads. I think I've just been around dogs that eat wasps. So... but the exploitation thing, because there's just a basic harm argument, like, we shouldn't eat animals because it's morally bad to kill things. Yeah. Like I'm like, oh yes, that's bad. I don't want to kill things. But you also kill animals to protect crops. So like you got to stop rabbits and insects from eating crops. So you have to use, well, you don't have to, but something. Corporations are definitely going to be using horrible pesticides that kill lots of things and poison the water and kill the fish. And
I think the inherent immorality of harming or hurting animals is a real muddy territory that we're not going to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a swamp, isn't it? Right. Yeah. Whereas the environmental one, that's much more kind of clear, but so is exploitation, because if you kill a rabbit to stop eating cabbages, you're still not exploiting it. That like if you're getting a rabbit to like, well, rabbit's a bad example.
Yeah, but
you see what I mean.
This is the weeds I don't want to get into. Yeah. But like, what? It's worse to exploit someone than to kill them.
No, I don't think it is worse, but I think it's a more coherent argument, because it's the same argument as the critique of capitalism.
Unpack that again for me.
Exploitation is why capitalism is wrong.
Okay, and so if you are an anti-capitalist, you have to be a vegetarian.
No, I think no. I'm saying where my original point is leftism.
Yeah,
animal liberation.
Okay,
separate. We got there, yeah?
Yeah.
And then my second
I was
point is,
there
and
before
then
we started
my
talking.
points were actually, there's actually some stuff that's quite similar here in the arguments within them. So one is that we need to stop capitalism to avoid environmental catastrophe.
Yeah.
Eating meat, and not a good argument for us not doing that is because it will avoid environmental catastrophe. Okay, so that's one similarity between the two.
Yeah.
A second similarity between the two is that one reason capitalism is bad is because of exploitation. Another reason the meat industry is bad is because of exploitation. That was my point.
Yeah, pretty good point. Like you're just saying capitalism causes exploitation, but you're just saying it in two different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you agree with... Yeah, so that's my point.
Yeah. We're on the same page. We agree.
We're there eventually. So my point is that they seem separate, but actually they've got these fundamental similar things. But the more meaningful thing is the capitalism, right? That's the thing you...
Yeah, that's
the thing
what
you
I'm
gotta
trying to
fight.
say is that
Yeah.
you're making the distinction isn't there if you just see both of these things are capitalism. The meat industry is just a facet of capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's weird because a lot of the animal liberation, like you're not going to see Peter put out anti-capitalist stuff.
But the only distinction I see is that with vegetarianism, there's more of a desire to do ethical consumption with vegetarianism than there is with all of capitalism, because with all of capitalism, it's impossible.
Exactly. So why it's so strange to me, because the environmental and exploitation arguments are two of the most convincing arguments for being vegan or vegetarian.
Well, I think it's because if the meat from the children who died to make my phones were in the phone and I could see it on the screen, then I'd probably be a bit more squeamish with it. And so when I see meat, I'm just a bit too close to the violence.
Yeah.
But if like the fingers of the Chinese factory workers who jumped off the
it's made out of
the
some
building
had
to be like on me as a key ring.
Yeah, your Nintendo Switch is just made out of a femur.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
I mean, we're describing a very on-the-nose art installation here.
Consumer activism does almost fuck all to undermine capitalism, right?
The thing about vegetarianism and veganism is it because it became so popular as a piece of boycott-style activism that it has started making some changes, but it's just that capitalism is now absorbing.
Yeah, it's just adapting.
It's just going, we'll use a new kind of exploitation to make these vegan products.
Yeah, like McDonald's and Nestle, who are not socialist organizations, are launching like a veggie burger.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's just, the Che Guevara on the t-shirt. You need to understand that consumer choice isn't going to change that. But I've made that same mistake of I'm like, oh, this is a thing I can do.
But I think you can frame the argument in a completely different way. It's like, I won't buy Nestle products. I don't consciously think I'm going to take down Nestle.
No.
But it makes me feel sad to buy Nestle products.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's okay to do that. Sometimes activism is actually just a form of self-care.
Yeah, it's an internal thing. And I do think that's what it is. I think it's like seeking agency because you've got so little power under capitalism to do anything. And one of the few things that they will give you is you have agency and control over what you consume. Mm-hmm. So if you choose, I am not going to consume this animal flesh, I'm going to consume vegetables instead. That's a choice. You've got you're diminishing your own guilt. Great. But it's for yourself rather than like a movement necessarily. And then you have a little bit of a sense of control. It's the same reason more people go to the gym now. Like, yeah, okay, on one hand, people are like maybe more conscious of their own health, but they're like, people are alienated and don't have control of things. And then what do you control? Oh, I can control my diet and I can control my body and I can spend time being very strict about eating wasps. I can control what's going in here and how strong I am is a form of expression. And then you got the kind of overlap of those two things of like gym and vegan health food thing of people's kind of source of a sense of self, a sense of agency.
But there's a difference because veganism comes with some kind of moral attachment and no one's like, I'm going to the gym because it's to help the planet. Veganism is just different because it has that element that veganism, inevitably you have to justify the fact you're making a sacrifice. Like veganism's tough.
I think there's definitely an element of the moralization with the gym goers who like probably think they're better than the not gym goers. That's probably true of certain vegans as well.
Oh, I've had self-discipline.
The kind of piousness.
Do you know when you go to like the vegan festivals, there's two kinds of vegans that I think are too far. There's the raw vegans, and then there's the like bodybuilder vegans.
Right.
And the bodybuilder vegans are just like they're the dialectic between two extremes. They've internalized two kinds of shame. so I can save the planet by because we fucking hedge. I think there is this thing of like all vegans and all these like really like stick thin, really weedy, like those Mr. Muscle, weedy mascot characters. And they're like, no, I'm going to save the planet and I'm going to be unfeasibly big just on protein. But I mean, if you go to the vegan festivals, you'll see what capitalism is very much at play there.
Oh, it's co-opted the hell out of it.
Was like vegan water was one of some of the most amazing things I've seen.
Jesus.
Harvested in a more, they're like, I think it's refined from
Falls from the sky
sap or something.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, it's very, very expensive.
And probably really labour intensive and industrialised, I would imagine, if they're
I think
harvesting
it's boutique
water
now,
from
but if
trees.
it does well enough, yeah, you'll have some Eastern Europeans having to like tap trees for water.
Well, see, yeah, then the problem isn't...
Imagine having to do cheap minimum wage labour to like tap trees for water, but you're not allowed to drink any of that water. You've got to drink your own water from a different source.
Well, yeah. Well, it's... And I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything about animal liberation or veganism or vegetarianism, and your priority should be to... Because that's the same as being like, solving racism doesn't get rid of capitalism, so fuck that, like that kind of stupid way of thinking. That's like proper like SWP kind of logic. Like that's why SWP just completely alienated like anti-racism and anti-sexism stuff. Yeah, because they didn't understand intersectionality.
And look what that got. Yeah. I'm not saying, the only struggle is like the one big struggle, but at the same time, I don't think people should start thinking that ethical consumerism, there is a risk that people think they're doing their bit.
Yeah.
By having a Linda McCartney sausage. And I think everyone needs to have a lot of humility about like how ineffectual everyone's behavior is. We're all looking for ways to sort of alleviate a feeling of shame and weirdness and guilt, and doing so is perfectly fine. And I absolutely celebrate that.
And to regain a sense of control.
Yeah, and all that's really fine. I just think we need to understand that we can destroy a meat industry and then just have, the palm oil industry double so it can deal with loads of new vegan foods that require it. Like there'll always be a new way that capitalism will find to just eat through the planet.
Yeah.
It just might not involve chicken flesh anymore.
Are chickens comrades?
I mean, why not? I mean, Chicken Run actually implies that they're already got a, if nothing else, sort of POW kind of perspective of the world.
Definitely. Key piece of radical literature. Yeah, fuck Orwell's Animal Farm. Get on Chicken Run.
A few years ago, I went to visit my friend Liam, who at this time lived on a miniature yacht in Brighton Marina while he finished his cultural and critical theory degree. Yachts are normally a signifier of wealth and luxury, because owning and maintaining a boat as a hobby takes an amount of money and spare time that no just society would allow any individual to have. But moments into my visit, I realised the reality of living on a miniature yacht full-time will melt those associations into the brine. During the off-season, the marina is a shanty town of people lured into floating caravans by the promise of cheap rent in an increasingly expensive city. At night, seagulls drop crustaceans from great heights, great enough to shatter the tough carapaces, and their shattering bodies reverberate across the blackened marina like someone cracking walnuts in the dark. To relieve yourself after hours, you need to pick your way through the detritus of dying crabs and their exploded bones. That night, we drank tiny bottles of European lager, and I watched Liam roll joints on a dog-eared version of Francis Fukuyama's The End of History, while I said I didn't want any because it sets off my anxiety, both about the book and the drugs. The worst thing about it is I think the whole scene captures a lifestyle that conforms to someone's romantic left-wing ideal. And worse yet is that I know that person, their name's Liam, and they're a dear friend. In the morning, he hit me with a question. Have you heard of Kropotkin's crab? I didn't understand the question. Peter Kropotkin is a naturalist and anarchist who came up with the idea of mutual aid, the principle of voluntary mutual cooperation, which is basically a founding idea of anarchist organisation. Kropotkin's epiphany moment came when he was watching a crab that had somehow got flipped over and trapped on his back at Brighton Sea Life Centre in 1882. Another crab came along, thought nothing of it, just stuck out a claw, pushed him right back the right way, and mutual aid was born. Liam suggested we go to visit Brighton Sea Life Centre and find and see the crab for ourselves. No, that
That crab will be dead, I responded. Liam says he believes I thought crabs basically live forever. This did not seem right to me. This seemed very implausible. I was still remembering the sound of walnuts in the night. At the Sea Life Centre, every tank had 2 to 3 colourful fish that were named, colourful and conventionally attractive. The fish was sexy is what I'm saying. But every tank was also filled out with these hordes of nondescript grey proletarian fish that were unnamed, unloved and unfuckable. Really wasn't too comfortable with this strange caste system, especially one of the landmarks of anarchist intellectual discovery. What it was lacking, though, was any discernible crab section, and as a last resort we did eventually go up to ask enthusiastic mid-20s members of staff. We approached very hesitantly and asked, "Hi, sorry, excuse me, do you know where we could find Kropotkin's crab?" And they very earnestly responded with, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've only worked here a few months, I don't really know everyone yet." And I had to very slowly and deliberately say, "Oh, no, so Peter Kropotkin is a naturalist and anarchist philosopher from the 19th century, and he saw a crab here in 1882, and it was at this point I really started to lose my nerve. Something really felt off, so I changed tack, and I asked, how long do crabs live, actually? And they immediately came back with, crabs very rarely live over 20 to 30 years. Oh, yeah, of course, thank you, sorry, goodbye, sorry. I'm very sorry, goodbye. There was something dreadful, maybe even disgusting, about slowly disengaging from that conversation. I knew that crab couldn't possibly be alive, and yet I'd somehow been lured into asking after it, like I was a time traveller. Lobsters, it turns out. Lobsters can live forever. Some weird genetic fluke means that they can produce healthy telomerase, which is it's the enzyme that protects the ends of DNA strands and it prevents replication mistakes. The reason we die of old age is that our telomerase becomes weakened or we don't produce enough of it, so it doesn't protect our DNA so that they can kind of uncoil a little bit at the ends and we can replicate badly and eventually enough mistakes and our body stops making sense and we die. Not lobsters though, they can produce that for basically as long as they like. So getting older doesn't actually affect their chance of dying. But they're not immortal. They die naturally because they never stop growing. They grow and they molt and create a new hard exoskeleton every few years. Eventually they just can't support their own size and they die. Either they contract diseases because of their poor metabolism and immune system, or in some cases they fail to molt off their previous exoskeletons but still continue to grow within it. So if anyone needs any heavy-handed metaphors, unlike the plucky crab helping out its inverted mate, having a wacky 30 years and then popping its clogs, the lobster soldiers on, only to be crushed alive by its pre-programmed trajectory of perpetual growth.
Do you think anything lives in the sewers?
I mean, just rats, bacteria. I don't think there's mutants or alligators. Alligators was the myth in New York, right?
Alligators, yeah.
And what did that come from? People were like getting alligators and chucking them out. Our
Baby
equivalent,
alligators.
because in New York people were getting baby alligators and then they got big, as they inevitably would, and people flushed them, and that's where that myth came from. But our equivalent is the
Terrapins?
No, I was going to say our equivalent of that myth is like the big cats that are living on the moors.
Oh, yeah.
Because gentry used to have, I've got this quite large kitten.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a tiger.
Yeah.
I need to get rid of it. No, it wasn't that. It was that law was
Accidental
passed.
saber-tooth.
It wasn't that they flushed it due to their own self-preservation. There was a law passed, right, saying stop having big cats.
Is that a law?
Well, I don't know if it's still a law now, but there was something passed which ruled out all these aristocrats who because it used to be aristocrats would just buy a camel or a giraffe and they just roam the lands and...
Well, the animal or the aristocrat riding them?
both. I mean, both. The aristocrat would roam the lands anyway. The giraffe now in the land is the new addition to what roams.
Apparently giraffes didn't evolve the long neck to eat higher up stuff. They just eat the same like level of stuff as whatever other animals are around there.
They use it to fight.
They use it to A, fight, and B, other giraffes find the long neck sexy. So it's like, that's what it's selected for. It's like, the longer the neck, the hotter the giraffe.
So both sexes find the long neck sexy. It's not like there's no dimorphism. There's not like you wouldn't get like a female giraffe has like a normal horse's head, and then the male giraffe has this full neck.
Yeah, it must go both ways.
So I was thinking of like peacocks, where like those traits are selected
sexy.
for. Yeah, that's nice actually. That what they find sexy in each other.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of like about a lot of quadrupeds. They're not like very gendered.
Is that your top quadruped?
Top quads.
Yeah.
Rhino's got to be up there.
Right up there. Which rhino?
Probably one of the... I'm going to pick one that's going to go extinct in the hope that maybe this podcast will clinch it.
Yeah. I used to like the rhino Pokemon. There's the little one. Rhyhorn. Is it Rhydon that he evolves into?
Rhydon's not a rhino, though, because he's bipedal, isn't he, Rhydon?
He's a rhino that's... Yeah, I think he's become bipedal. He's gone onto his back legs and got, like, claws. Yeah, I suppose he's not rhino anymore. And I think his horns are drill. His horns are drill.
Once he's down on your back legs, and that's a transhuman, isn't it? They've got industrial technology.
There's definitely industrial technology, because how is the drill nose working? Like, that has to be mechanical. You can't have a biological...
You can't have a biological drill?
No. So what are your other... you got rhino.
Yeah, rhino. The things to get excited about is like proper megafauna. Megafauna that just hasn't died out.
You like the 16-foot alligator walking across the golf course that's like a dinosaur on that video. That guy.
Moose as well. They don't get enough credit, but
big boys.
Like full, like grown buck mooses.
Yeah, daddy moose.
Yeah.
Big boy.
They're terrifying. They're like... They like tower over like a 4x4.
I think moose noise might be one of the noises in either the Jurassic Park T-Rex noise or the Star Wars Wookiee noise. Because, they're like just fucked up audio samples of animals. I think moose noise is in there.
I could imagine that. They're going to have a very deep bellow. And that like there's something really weird that happens to like moose's horns. They grow like skin all over them, and then
what the fuck? There's skin on the horn.
They grow skin all over their horns.
Oh no, thanks.
And then their skin, they've got to like rub their skin off in the spring.
Oh, what? Are you having a laugh? I'm just believe it. Is that real?
Yeah, they grow skin all over their horns.
What? I'm going to look like an idiot.
And then they've got to manually scratch off their skin.
I can't tell if this is real.
I don't know how to prove it to you. They scratch off their skin. And it's all bloody as well. Like, there's all blood and bits of old skin on their horn.
That is rank.
Yeah, it's very strange.
I mean, the moose can't do anything about it, so I guess maybe I shouldn't find it rank. But instinctively, I find that quite rank.
Instinctively having to scratch off skin off your horns.
Yeah.
But even just saying that, imagining any context in which that sentence isn't revolting is quite hard.
Would you like an antler?
One?
Antlers. Like if you had, or a
when
horn,
When I was young, I desperately wanted a tail. I think that was the one I thought was like the best appendage.
Definitely useful for balance. You can use, it's a third limb. You can pick stuff up.
I had this idea that I could use it to hold things, and I could use it to like hang on branches, and, like a lemur tail. I wanted that level of
Imagine gyms. There's like the tail area. Everyone just like doing pull-ups, but reverse.
What? Don't forget tail down.
Yeah.
But antlers, horrific. Like, you would not get through doorways.
Nightmare for doors, yeah.
The only thing that they're used for is to gore your enemies. And I'm not about to gore my enemies.
Yes, because you haven't got antlers. If you had antlers, game on. Come after Morley, going to get antlered. Although I suppose they might then have... If it's a world where you've got antlers.
That is the most incriminating way to get revenge on anyone.
What, antler attack?
The idea that you've made it really easy for the detective.
Oh, there's antler fragments in here.
Or there's a witness saying it was done with antlers.
Yeah.
Well, let's look through our database at the one individual who has antlers, who's also in the news because they've got antlers.
Yeah. They wouldn't mess though, would they?
They wouldn't mess. They wouldn't try and arrest me.
Yeah, cops bursting on you, sitting there with your antlers.
I can charge one SWAT shield and then that's it. I'm gone.
Some aristocrat would buy you anyway, and then you'd be safe because you don't belong to an aristocrat, and then you're property, and the cops can't do anything.
I guess if I was able to shirk my humanity completely, you're not actually allowed to Like, I looked into this. You're not allowed to, like, enslave yourself, even if you want to.
Enslave yourself?
Not that you own yourself. You'd, like, just
like, put
voluntarily
yourself on
become a
eBay.
slave. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to do that.
Sean Morley, £750,
That's like one of
antlers
the
included.
the last rights that we don't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't sell yourself as a slave. You can only rent yourself out. It has to be rental
It
plan.
has to be rental, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So what we need is a right to buy. Yeah, I've been renting you for a good 10 years now. I think I've got enough for the deposit. Imagine getting a mortgage on a person and you're there going, I've not even been paid for yet, but I'm still a slave.
Jesus. I mean, more job security if they've got a mortgage on you.
Yeah, that means that they at least had a credit check.
Someone had to inspect you for damp.
Yeah. Oh. That sounds great.
The bank nationwide had to come round with a clipboard.
How moist is this guy?
You know, sorry, he's absolutely riddled with rising damp.
Yeah, he's soaked.
There's black mould on his antlers.
I'm surprised he hasn't drowned.
In the animal world, we have seen the vast majority of species live in societies, and that they find in association the best arms for the struggle for life. The animal species in which individual struggle has been reduced to its narrowest limits and the practice of mutual aid has attained the greatest development are invariably the most numerous, the most prosperous. The mutual protection which is obtained in this case, the possibility of attaining old age and of accumulating experience, the higher intellectual development and the further growth of sociable habits secure the maintenance of the species, its extension, its further progressive evolution. The unsociable species, on the contrary, are doomed to decay. Take crabs. I was struck in 1882 at the Brighton Aquarium with the extent of mutual assistance which these clumsy animals are capable of bestowing upon a comrade in case of need. One of them had fallen upon its back in a corner of the tank, and its heavy saucepan-like carapace prevented it from returning to its natural position. The more so, as there was in the corner an iron bar which rendered the task still more difficult. Its comrades came to the rescue, and for 1 hour's time I watched how they endeavoured to help their fellow prisoner. They came to at once, pushed their friend from beneath, and after strenuous efforts succeeded in lifting it upright. But then the iron bar would prevent them from achieving the work of rescue, and the crab would again heavily fall upon its back. After many attempts, one of the helpers would go in the depth of the tank and bring 2 other crabs, which would begin with fresh forces the same pushing and lifting of their helpless comrade. We stayed in the aquarium for more than 2 hours, and when leaving, we again came to cast a glance upon the tank. The work of rescue still continued. Life in societies is the most powerful weapon in the struggle for life. Life in societies enables the feeblest insects, the feeblest birds, and the feeblest mammals to resist or to protect themselves from the most terrible birds and beasts of prey. Therefore, while fully admitting that force, swiftness, protective colours, cunningness, and endurance to hunger and cold are so many qualities making the individual or the species the fittest under certain circumstances, we maintain that under any circumstances, sociability is the greatest advantage in the struggle for life.
The words of Peter Kropotkin from his book, Mutual Aid, A Factor of Evolution. Kropotkin used science and history to show that anarchism isn't naive or optimistic, but based on scientifically observable behaviour. His book explores the role of mutual aid, cooperation between both animals and humans. For Kropotkin, mutual aid has practical advantages for survival and, along with the conscience, has been promoted through natural selection. Hold on, does that mean the feeling of guilt is an evolutionary advantage? Because that's how I feel all the time. Kropotkin attacks the state and the principle of private property that it upholds as artificial, warping and suppressing humans' natural, sociable and cooperative tendencies. If you saw someone fall over, your instinct would be to help them, but capitalism and the state will make you point and laugh and only help them up if they give you a sufficient Amazon voucher. Kropotkin's mutual aid is a masterpiece, recognised for its contributions to biology and developing a scientific anarchism to compete with Marxist historical materialism. It's also a comprehensive, clearly written debunking of social Darwinism.
Get wrecked, bootlickers.
Kropotkin would have an amazing YouTube channel. So what is social Darwinism? Charles Darwin's theory of evolution basically invented biology, But the theory of evolution, although Charles Darwin didn't mean it this way, also provided the intellectual framework for a new kind of racism. Oops. Natural selection provided a scientific explanation and justification for the dominance of the white race. For imperialists, this was a big upgrade from the Christian mission to civilize the savages, the so-called white man's burden, because it wasn't based on faith, but science, logic and reason. And it basically meant being horrible fucks to other peoples was good, actually. Imperialism was just the natural process of evolution. If Europeans didn't brutally conquer the world, they were betraying their race. Darwin's Origin of Species came out in 1859. Less than 2 decades later, the British Viceroy of India, Lord Lytton, used the notion of natural selection to justify starving millions of Indians to death. As millions died slowly of hunger, the Viceroy hosted a huge feast for Victoria's coronation as Empress. In the countryside, parents sold their children for food. Others resorted to cannibalism, some to suicide. The famines in India in the 1870s were so bad because the British had dismantled traditional safety nets for reducing the impact of a famine. The commons were gone, and peasants were pushed to grow cash crops for export for the market, all in the pursuit of maximum profit. During the famine, Lytton oversaw the export to England and America of a record 6.4 million hundredweight of wheat. In his letters, Lytton argued that intervening to stop these millions dying would be to interfere with nature. The famine was good, as it was removing the weak. Eventually, Lytton was pressured to take some action. He built labour camps where peasants would be given minute rations in exchange for hard labour. The death toll continued to rise in the camps, but now malnourished children, unable to work, were the quickest to die. 5.5 million Indians starved to death under British rule in the 1870s. Obviously, this is one of the worst crimes in British history. Hands up if you learn about it at school. This horrendous tragedy was not seen as such by the men who did it, but as an expression of the natural forces of evolution. Social Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. The rancid ideology of social Darwinism spread through the British elite like a virus. They loved it, but it also frightened them. They started to get scared that the working classes back in Britain outnumbered them. Racist books from the late 1800s don't just talk about white and black, they also warn of the Cockney race and the Scottish race. They drew up maps of where these inferior races lived so they could avoid them. Some race scientists dared to visit these areas, workhouses and prisons, to learn more. One of them was Charles Darwin's cousin, Francis Galton. Frankie G was brown in his pants because the underclass were reproducing faster than the wealthy. Social Darwinism was turned on its head. The least fit were surviving. He decided to work out how to reverse this trend, get evolution back on track. So he created a new science of human selective breeding to make sure the fittest survived. The best should multiply, the weakest should wither. He invented eugenics. Social Darwinism doesn't have to be full-on eugenics, even though that's where it ended up. Social Darwinism also underlies mainstream thought about capitalism. The idea that capitalism is natural, anything else is unnatural, is social Darwinist. Sure, maybe there's some moral argument for welfare or education for the underclass, a safety net. But that doesn't take away from the fact that humans are naturally selfish. Our nature is competition and greed. Why would anyone do anything without the promise of profit? Socialism or anarchism is a nice idea, but it'll never work because it's unnatural. The fact that Kropotkin systematically demolished this idea, an idea that still gets trotted out today, in the 1890s is astounding. And Kropotkin's argument wasn't moral, it was scientific and historical. Providing example after example, from crabs to dung beetles to medieval peasants, Kropotkin showed that mutual aid is a dominant feature at every level of animal and human life. Cooperation is not the exception but the rule. Despite hierarchy, despite capitalism, despite the state, people everywhere continue to practice mutual aid, in trade unions, in libraries, which Kropotkin's weirdly obsessed with, and of course, in revolution. Kropotkin was an international intellectual celebrity in his time, renowned in geography, biology and sociology. The main founder of the anarchist movements in England and Russia, but he shunned material success. Not just an aristocrat, but a prince and one-time aide to the Russian Tsar. This man devoted his life to anarchism and the better understanding of humanity. In 1899, Kropotkin visited Chicago in America and lived in Hull House, a kind of settlement commune, giant squat, which covered like half a city block. Alice Hamilton, one of the workers at the settlement, said this about him. Prince Peter Kropotkin was one of the most lovable persons I have ever met. He was a typical revolutionist of the early Russian type, an aristocrat who threw himself into the movement for emancipation of the masses out of a passionate love for his fellow man and a longing for justice. He stayed some time with us at Hull House, and we all came to love him. Not only we who lived under the same roof, but the crowds of Russian refugees who came to see him. No matter how down and out, how squalid even a caller would be, Prince Kropotkin would give him a joyful welcome and kiss him on both cheeks. Exiled from Russia, his home country, for his politics, Kropotkin returned after the 1917 revolution. He was 74 years old. He arrived before the Bolshevik Revolution overthrew the provisional government that had replaced the Tsar in February. The provisional government offered to make him Minister of Education, which, being an anarchist, he didn't want to do. He spent the rest of his life writing a history of ethics in an anarchist cooperative north of Moscow, where he died in 1921. His funeral, attended by thousands of admirers, grew into a demonstration against the abuses of the Bolshevik state. But within a year, anarchists were arrested, killed, or forced into hiding. Survival of the fittest, I guess. Kropotkin's funeral was the last time the Soviet Union allowed the black flag of anarchism to fly. I don't want to depress you, so let's end on one of my favourite quotes from one of Kropotkin's other famous books, The Conquest of Bread.
Those who man the lifeboat do not ask credentials from the crew of a sinking ship. They launch their boat, risk their lives and the raging waves, and sometimes perish, all to save men whom they do not even know. And what need to know them? They are human beings and they need our aid. That is enough. That establishes their right. To the rescue!
Mandatory Redistribution Party was created and produced by Sean Morley and Jack Evans. Our title theme was created by Ella Jean, with additional music by Jack Evans, that's me, and under Sean's crab story, Johannes Brahms' Variations on a Theme by Haydn, performed by Neal and Nancy O'Dowan. You also heard Amy Gledhill in the role of Peter Kropotkin. Comes to us live on November the 27th at the Pier Hat in Manchester, that's next Wednesday, and on December the 2nd at Bolshevism in Leeds. Farewell.